Hi everybody, this is another Buddhism video, and this is GCE Edexcel paper 4. This is the anthology work, and this is the first of the 4 anthology pieces that you'll answer in section B, and we're looking at the first, which is Karen Armstrong's book The Buddha, and chapter 3, Enlightenment. So we're up to section 3. Section 3 begins years later, just after he had cried with mingled optimism and despair, "Surely there must be another way to enlightenment." Gautama recalled this childhood experience. Well, what's going on here? He's kind of got no closer to enlightenment. That's the story. He's at the end of his fast for apparently 4 or 5 years of the 6-7 years he's away, and he's nearing death, and he has this moment of recollection, and it follows at this moment of doubt. His extreme asceticism hasn't worked, and according to the Jakarta tale, he has this recollection of the meditative act under the rose apple tree, and well, he's in desperation. He's absolutely in desperation. He recalls this moment from his childhood, so it's recorded in the Jakarta tales. But it's interesting. We're now getting to the middle way, the denial of the self, as well as the path of pleasure. Neither brings satisfaction or liberation. But just think about this next sentence. At that moment, again, unpremeditated and unsought, the memory of that childhood ecstasy rose to the surface of his mind. Now, this is Armstrong's interpretation of the Jakarta tale, and it is sounding a bit like an embellishment. How much do we know about the extent of his fasting? Is this just another gospel of the Buddha, of Armstrong's own making, another dramatized retelling? How do we know it was unpremeditated and unsought? Well, this is in fact insight meditation. If you meditate, this is his first, and it's kind of affirming that form of meditation. So in insight meditation, ideas just rise to the surface of the mind, as it were. So she's reading back into the Buddha's life, insight meditation, which is kind of what Buddhists do anyway. Okay, moving on. Emaciated and exhausted and dangerously ill, Gautama remembered the cool shade of the rose apple tree, which inevitably brought to the mind the coolness of Nibbana. So this dramatized retelling of Armstrong, emaciated and exhausted, does sound like one of the later Ashvaghosha's Buddhachara Acts of the Buddha account. What would various types of Buddhists say in response to her version of the Buddha? That's interesting. Is he emaciated? Is he exhausted? Is he dangerously ill? Probably. But it is an interpretation of what's in the texts. The coolness of Nibbana, or in Pali, in Sanskrit, nirvana. Nirvana literally means the cool, or to extinguish. So that's interesting that they've got the coolness, and she's probably right to put that in quotation marks, meaning, because the Nibbana itself means coolness, to blow out the flames of this world, of things that keep us in samsara. Nibbana is seen as cool. It's seen as a state where suffering has been extinguished, or to put it another way, the flames of desire have been extinguished. Next, most yogins could only achieve the first jhana after years of study and hard work, but it came to him without any effort on his part, and had given him a foretaste of Nibbana. Is it believable that as a child he could just enter the higher states of meditation without any practice. Either it's not that difficult to get into these states, or he had some kind of coaching, much like grammar school entrance, I suppose. Uh, but is it believable that he just sort of entered into the state? Well, is it possible? You do get precocious children. Some students are quite spiritual, naturally. Others less so. So you can think about that for yourself. But again, be critical in your thinking on Armstrong. Ever since next he left Kapilavastu, remember this is the capital of the Shakya tribe, he had shunned all happiness as part of his campaign against desire. During his years as an ascetic, he had almost destroyed his body, hoping he could thereby force himself into the sacred world that was the inverse of humanity's usual suffering existence. Well, first of all, we have mentioned Kapilavastu. His going forth left this sort of out-of-the-way provincial place. It wasn't really that impressive a kingdom, to go to the great metropolis of the Iron Age of Magadha, where iron had really been discovered. It was the center of the industrial world of the Amazon, the Ganges basin and so on in that part of the world. He could thereby force himself into the sacred world. The basic thinking behind the Shamrama ascetics. Well, she's probably right. That is the ascetics. They were stormtroopers trying to force their way into heaven or into the spiritual realm, as it were, in various ways and various guises. At least some were. I suppose some weren't because they just didn't believe in an afterlife. But certainly that was the view of many of the ascetics of the Shamrama movement. Moving on. Yet as a child he had attained that yogic ecstasy without any trouble at all, after an experience of pure joy. So again, we don't know whether it was as a child. That's just what some of the later texts say, but they say all kinds of things. It could be from age 2 to age 22. And without any trouble at all, again, we don't know this. This is, this is the recollection of the Buddha that goes back to his own childhood, as retold in one of the Jataka tales. It doesn't quite say without any trouble at all, but certainly that's the dramatized retelling of his story. As he reflected on the coolness of the rose apple tree, he imagined in his weakened state the relief of being convalescent, Nibbutta, after a lifetime of fever. So yes, we read about it in the Jataka tale in 547, his recounting his reminiscence of that particular event from his childhood. And this is a reference in the weakened state to the end of his great fast, his 6 years of renunciation, 2 of which would have been meditation. Is it fair to say he was weakened? Yeah, probably it is. The state of one who's attained nirvana was his goal. That's Nibbutta. That's what it means. The state of one who's attained nirvana, his goal. Moving on. He was struck by an extraordinary idea. But was it an extraordinary idea? Before we move on, was it his own idea, or were some of these ideas knocking about the Shamrama movement, or much older? Could it be that it wasn't his own original idea, that he's been provoked at least by some of these other ascetics or Shamrama movement? Meditation was practiced way back by the Brahmins in the Indus Valley, so that's not a new thing. Kush herself, not himself, herself says, he learnt from Alara Kalama and Udaka Ramaputta how to achieve advanced levels of meditative states, known in Buddhism as the mental state of nothingness, of neither perception nor non-perception. So in what sense is all of this an extraordinary idea? I think she protests too much. A lot of it wasn't his, he just borrowed a lot from other places. So moving on, could this, he asked himself, possibly be the way to enlightenment? Had the other teachers been wrong? Instead of torturing their reluctant selves to the final release, we might be able to achieve it effortlessly, spontaneously. Could Nibbana be built into the structure of our humanity? Whoa! Here we get a metaphysical question. Is this the mystical Armstrong's uncritical pantheism? If you're an atheist, you want to be, or theist, you want to be. Oh, hold on, hold the horses. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you think pantheism is true? Do you think that is what is the case? Or are you a Buddhist and agree with this? It's up to you. You're going to have to be critical. Moving on. If an untrained child could reach the first jhana and have intimations of Nibbana without even trying, then yogic insight must be profoundly natural to human beings. So different types of meditation in Buddhism. We mentioned some of these before, but Samtha, we'll do this after Christmas, but Samtha meditation is this, and Vipassana are these two types of meditation that, well, they're particular to Theravada and Mahayana. Dhyana just means quiet meditation. We're going to come back to these later, so don't worry. These are stuff we will look at. But it's a synoptic unit. You need to know these different types of meditation. So Samantha is the quieting of your mind before perhaps then you engage in Vipassana, the insight meditation, which is more Theravada and conceptual. Moving on. Instead of making yoga an assault upon humanity, perhaps it could be used to cultivate inner tendencies that lead to, here's a great word, Cito Vimutti, the release of the mind that was the synonym for supreme enlightenment. Right. Cito Vimutti. Pali Theravada version of Nibbana is something quietistic, a state of perfect understanding, consciousness. And Armstrong in using this word is avoiding the contradictory ideas of Mahayana. Mahayana mistrust the doctrine that enlightenment is a religious experience of intuition. This Cito Vimutti, it must be said, Mahayanas don't agree with it. Armstrong is flattening the debate here between Theravada and Mahayana. She sees Buddhism as a homogeneous whole, and that just isn't the case. Be critical, young people. Be critical. Tune in again.